Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again.
You're streaming with the Fantasy Follow. It's the Tuesday waiver show here on the Fantasy Follow, getting you ready for week 2. It starts right now. It's a big day of football. You can do this. Make those good decisions. There's never a better time than this week. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Follow. This is the TFF Live Tuesday waiver show. Week 1 in the books, getting you ready for week 2, talking about players that you could possibly improve your roster headed in to your next week of fantasy football. We're glad to have you with us. We're here for a while. We got a lot of content for you, but as always, our live chat is open. We've got the message pinned in the chat. Feel free to drop us a chat anytime. We will get to those as soon as we can. If you're watching on replay, feel free to leave us comments below. We got a lot of content for you, so let's get right into it. I see some early comments already, and let's go ahead and start right out with that one. Bill Romanowski is the first comment, thumbs up. And before we get to his comment, let me put a little plug in here for the current leader of the 6 picks game. That is Bill Romanowski joining us tonight, one of our regulars. We do have the link to the week 2 6 picks game in the description area below for those of you that want to get in for this week. So feel free to go ahead and use that link. And also we've got a little banner here created for that to give you a little bit more information on that. So we'll let that scroll across the screen as we go through the show. All right, going over back to the first chat of the night here from Bill Romanowski. He says, dropping Mostert tomorrow. Thoughts on Elijah Mitchell, 49ers running back? Well, Bill, you teed it up nicely for me tonight because this is the Tuesday waiver show. And what I have here is I have my top 5 waiver picks for this week and also some bonus picks. And, of course, as you mentioned, the very number 1 person on this pick, of course, my new banner is in the way of my graphics. We'll have to work on that for next week. Get that out of the way. The number 1 pick on the waiver wire to me this week is the guy that you mentioned, and that's Elijah Mitchell for the 49ers. Now, unfortunately, Raheem Mostert, I mean, he was drafted reasonably high by a lot of players, injury prone, and now out for the season. Certainly not what you wanted. But the whole situation that went down this week with Trey Sermon was strange. You wouldn't expect him to be inactive anymore, but it does sound like Kyle Shanahan is indicating that Elijah Mitchell might be ahead of Sermon in terms of priority at this point. I don't know how that's going to work out. The backfield in San Francisco is difficult to predict. I've always felt that way. It's a tough backfield to work with. Certainly they're going to split. There's going to be times when just mystery, what we call Shanahanigans happen. But either way, you're in week 2 of fantasy football here. So the waiver wire right now is a lot about the same way as late picks in a draft, the way I felt that they were. You're taking flyers at this point. If you happen, this is like an extra draft pick for your season. If you happen to hit on this pick, it's huge for your team. So if Elijah Mitchell turns out to be the guy in San Francisco, that could be a big boost to your team. Now, who knows if he's going to be or not? Does Trey Sermon get back in the good graces and kind of take that back over? We don't really know, but the fact is that there's potential out of Mitchell. So if there's one player that you're going to go for, if you have a waiver priority this week, I feel it's got to be Mitchell. Looking at his stats a little bit last week, 19 rushes, 104 yards with a touchdown. As I like to do with the waiver wire, it doesn't apply so much at this point in the season because it's so early. But in addition to taking a look at what players did in the previous week that might make them be warranted to be on this list, I kind of also like to look ahead at the matchups because there's nothing worse than spending let's say you have the number one waiver priority in your league, and you spend it for somebody who has just awful matchups in the next few weeks, and it comes back to hurt you. So there's nothing worse than that. That plays into how I rank my top 5. Mitchell's run, the next week they play Philadelphia, because it's early on, I not only look at this year, but also last year. After one game, this year to me doesn't mean quite as much. Philadelphia last year was 23rd most fantasy points to running back. So that's the 10th fewest. After that, they have Green Bay, who was the 5th most, Seattle, who was right in the middle at 16, and Arizona at 19. So this week is not the best of matchups, certainly a tougher matchup than it would have been against Detroit. But again, you're talking about a player who has potential upside for you moving forward throughout the rest of this season. I think if there's a guy you're going to try to get off the waiver wire, he's the guy. So he's my number 1 pick for week 2 on the waiver wire. Let me go back over to the comments here and let's see what we got here real quick before we go on to the next. Bill, I hope that helped you out with your question. Obviously, Mostert being out, there's no reason to continue with him at this point. If you have that priority, if you can get Mitchell, there's some potential there, and you just kind of see how it plays out at that point. Thank you again for the chat. And again, once again, our current leader in the 6 picks games, but all you other players out there who want to get involved and try to climb that leaderboard, take a shot. And I'm sure Bill will be there to try to defend his top standing right now. All right. As I said, we have the top 5 waiver wire players, in my opinion, and also some bonus ads. That is our content for the night. But as always, we are here for your chats. We can give you lots of content, but it's always better to talk fantasy football with you guys than just talk to you guys about it. So that's what we're here for. Drop us a chat. I see several already, and we'll go through them as they stop in. So A-Laden, one of our regulars, is back. Welcome back, A-Laden. You asked David Johnson or Le'Veon Bell need to drop one. Well, unfortunately for both of these guys, I feel like either one of them is droppable at this point. I think that Mark Ingram kind of separated himself in that backfield for Houston in the first game. You saw the amount of work that he got. David Johnson simply did not get that amount of work. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I do have Ingram's numbers, 26 rushes. I think that really there wasn't very much. The only workload that Johnson really saw was a little bit of pass catching. I don't expect him to be extremely productive as the year goes on. You would have thought you would have seen it in week 1. Le'Veon Bell, to be honest, what I can do is I can look up to see if there is a report on Bell. I'm not sure that Bell is even on the roster at this point. I know that Baltimore signed him to the practice squad first. So let me just see if there are any updates here. Of course, the computer never cooperates once we start these shows. There's Le'Veon Bell. Let's just see what they say here in terms of updates. They still have him listed as NA, which means he's not on a roster. That's the way I'm taking this. Ravens head coach John Harbaugh, this is Friday, said Le'Veon Bell still getting his legs under him. Exceedingly little chance Bell will be active for this last weekend. I really think that Latavius Murray is going to be the guy, and Tyson Williams is probably going to accompany him in that Baltimore backfield. I don't have big expectations for Le'Veon Bell at this point. Could it happen? Possibly, but he's pretty far removed from fantasy relevance. So, yeah, I think that like David Johnson at least is on a roster. And if there were situations where, obviously they have Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, but if there were injury concerns, at least there's a path. Not that you ever want to see anybody get hurt. I don't see a path for Le'Veon Bell right now until he's signed. So I would think that Le'Veon Bell is the guy that you can drop there. Probably, I don't think either one of them is really going to provide you a whole lot of value. There certainly are a lot of players out there that can benefit you more. I know the running back spot is tough, but yeah, I think either one of these are probably droppable. But if I had to pick one, I would probably pick Bell in this situation. At least Johnson's on a roster. Thank you, Aladdin, for the chat. Glad to have you back with us again. All you regulars, always appreciate you guys being on the live streams with us. So glad to see you back again. Takashi 6400, another one of our regulars. Welcome back, Takashi. Use waiver on Elijah Mitchell, or do you think Sermon is better? I think there's something going on in San Francisco that we don't know about, is what I think. it's just, I find it strange that 2 players on that team are suddenly, Sermon is a healthy scratch and Brandon Ayuk is nowhere to be found. And all that they say is the term that I think that I heard was meritocracy. What does that mean to you? Meritocracy to me means that somehow they have not established a good enough standing among the roster in terms of perhaps their work ethic or how the coaching staff feels that they are progressing in, who knows? It doesn't sound good. I didn't hear a lot of, Trey Sermon's not a good player. I didn't hear a lot of Brandon Ayuk is not a good player. It sounded more like, these guys have somehow rubbed someone on the coaching staff the wrong way and are getting a little bit of a slap on the wrist for it. With Ayuk's case, I'd be really surprised if he doesn't return in a few weeks. But for now, it might not be there. Trey Sermon, being that he's a rookie, I think that if Mostert hadn't gotten hurt, then it would have been much more likely that it would have been Mostert and Mitchell would have at least got the opportunity to prove himself. And if he did, then sorry, Trey Sermon. I mean, that looks like what they're kind of saying to him. Now that they're going to need Sermon regardless, you're looking at, to me, I mean, JaMychal Hasty is still there, of course. Who else do I have on the list here that's possible? I think Wayne Gallman might be there. There are other players, but it seems like they'll be forced to bring Trey Sermon back in, and it's going to be like a Sermon-Mitchell split. And what that basically means is whichever one of those guys shows up and produces is going to be in line to be their starter, and the other guy is going to probably be the 1B to their 1A. So do I think you use a waiver on Elijah Mitchell this week? I think if you can, you do, because this is really the best situation you can hope for out of the San Francisco backfield anyway. It's one of those backfields where you can rarely predict exactly what you're going to get. There's always a little bit of worry whenever you're playing one of those players about what the split's going to be or if something weird happens like we saw last weekend. So you're using that waiver on Mitchell because of his potential, not because we know for sure that he's going to be the guy and Trey Sermon is not. If you already have Trey Sermon, then you're protecting yourself. I don't feel like if you're looking for a running back this week on the waiver wire, I don't feel like there are very many good options. Really, the only other option that I see is Mark Ingram, and I don't think he's nearly as viable as Mitchell is, simply because of the fact that playing for Houston, it's not going to be likely there are many games where they play with the lead like they did against Jacksonville. San Francisco is going to be a run-first offense. There's going to be opportunities for those running backs to score fantasy points. So do I think Mitchell is worth it? Yes. I think he's one of the very few people that I would use my waiver priority on rather than just trying to build it up for a higher number in future weeks if there's somebody else better. So, yes, I do feel probably out of everybody that I have listed, the best case or the best argument for using that anybody to me is Elijah Mitchell. I think that he has some potential, and it's one of those situations where if you get him and he doesn't work out, he's like a late-round draft pick. You cut him, you move on, you work the waiver wire later on. If he does work out great, you might have got a leg up on your competition. So, yes, I do think the waiver is in play for Mitchell, and that's why I have him as the number 1 pick on my top 5 this week. I see a follow-up here from Takashi. I think Cole Beasley, the WR2 in Buffalo. Cole Beasley is going to be he did not make my top 5 for the waiver wire ads. And again, when we're talking about for my purposes of the top 5 waiver wire players, I consider to be players that are rostered in less than 50% of leagues. So there are going to be some players in your leagues who might be above 50 that might not land on these lists that might be good options for you. But in terms of the ones that I rank, because there's no way to predict who's available in what leagues, I take anybody that's rostered at 50%, and those are the players that I consider. Cole Beasley did make my bonus list this week, so we'll talk about him a little bit later. But based on his involvement in the game last week against Pittsburgh, 13 targets, it shows that he's going to continue to have involvement there. He's only rostered in 45% of leagues right now, so there's a good chance that he is available out there. So I do agree with you, Takashi. I think that is a player that you can look to bolster your wide receiver roster with. Let me follow that up with A. Aladdin, who asked a similar question. Do you think Emmanuel Sanders, WR2 in Buffalo? Well, it looks like, Takashi, you were probably answering the question about A. Aladdin asked there. So, I would say that I don't think Sanders, to me, like the fantasy production you've seen from Emmanuel Sanders in past years has always been a little lacking from what I expected. You think about his time in New Orleans when Michael Thomas wasn't there, and you expected bigger things, and you didn't really see it. Sanders in the first game, 8 targets. His involvement was decent. I thought for a long time in Buffalo that Gabe Davis is the guy that's going to emerge there. He did have a touchdown this week. I would be surprised if by the end of the year it isn't Gabe Davis that's taking over for Emmanuel Sanders in that spot. I think Beasley is solid where he's going to be behind Stephon Diggs. And the person that's behind them right now is going to be Sanders because of his experience. I really like Gabe Davis, and I really think if he has opportunity on offense, he's going to have a good chance to produce. So Emmanuel Sanders is not somebody that I would probably, until he proves himself, I would not probably be putting a lot of capital into trying to look into getting him off the waiver wire. He's only rostered in 21% of all leagues right now. I did make note of his production, but he did not land on my top lists this week. So he's certainly a situation to watch for because he is a big name, but it is not what I'm looking for in terms of the guy that's actually going to win out there. I really like Gabe Davis, but we'll see what happens there. Bill Romanowski says that he has a nice thumbs up. I appreciate all you guys with the likes. They really do help the channel out a ton. And as we always say, if any of you people are not yet subscribed, certainly that helps out the channel. But also we want to make sure that you guys are able to get those notifications whenever we have new content. We're working our way towards our first real subscriber goal of 100 subscribers. We're in the 70s right now. So, for sure, if you guys are new to the stream, if you enjoy us, gladly be glad to see you back on future streams and appreciate everybody that's in the chat. I see my friend Blair is in the chat here with a non-football question, so I'm just going to acknowledge Blair. Glad to have you on the stream tonight. Out in Seattle there, watching on West Coast time. It's a late stream, so it's a good time to check out the stream there, so appreciate you stopping by. Bill Romanowski says, Hines running back Colts is ranked high in my league's waiver pool. I don't believe he is rostered less than 50 because I did not write him down on my list. I know that I have him on one of my rosters. In fact, I believe in the league that I have him in is a league where I have Jonathan Taylor. So it's kind of a dual situation where not only is it Hines because he does have production now, especially in a PPR league, but also he serves as kind of a handcuff in case there was some sort of an injury to Taylor. I think Hines can be a nice spot start for you at different times. I think he's going to produce. I don't think he's certainly going to be to an RB2 level as long as Taylor is there. But if you're looking for a flex player or as we get into bye weeks and you're looking to fill roles, I think Nyheim Hines is a player that you can roster and use as the year goes on. So I don't think if he's available, if he's still available at this point, and he didn't have a huge game, I don't think this week. I don't have his stats in front of me. But I would think if he's still available now, you probably don't even need to use your waiver priority. I talked about this a little bit last night on the recap show. To me, how you use your waiver priority is important. And I like to try to save that if possible and let that number build up for a week when you really do have somebody that's worthy. Let's say you have a situation where there's an injury and there's a clear-cut person that steps in like at a running back spot or something like that. Almost, to me, Mitchell is not quite that, but there are other situations where you see somebody step in and they're going to pretty much be the bell cow type guy. You want to have that number up there so that you have the best shot to get them at that point. So if you got a player like, to me, Nyheim Hines, if nobody drafted Hines in your league, he would have needed to have a really big game for anybody else in your league to kind of say, oh, I better go get him off the waiver wire and use their priority for that. So if that hasn't happened, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to pick up Hines for free. It's kind of how I like to term it. Because, if you are able to build that number up and still get the guy that you want, then that is to your advantage. So I kind of always like to take a look at that. And you have to kind of balance what you're going to do in terms of using that priority versus the value that you believe that player is going to bring you. If you have, if you're thinking about Elijah Mitchell this week and you have 4 great running backs already and you have the number 1 waiver priority, then do you want to lose that by going out and getting Mitchell? Or do you want to keep that for later on in the event that you really need it sometime later for somebody else? So it's always a balance. And, there's no way, everybody's different. There's no way to really answer that question for everybody, but it's just kind of relating the way I kind of look at things. That number is very valuable to me. So having that be able to be built up, especially if you play in a league where it's very active on the waiver wire, there's a good chance your opponents are not thinking that way. there's a good chance they're just going to look and they're just going to say, I'm going to take whoever, and let's just get it. So that's opportunity for you to build that number up. But Hines is a player that's worthy, but I do think you could probably get him for free once the waivers are clear in this chance. You'll have to see. If you feel like you need to go out and get him, certainly it's a player that you can get if you have a lot of need at the running back spot right now. And if you're in that situation with Mitchell or Hines, if that were to be your decision, I probably would favor Mitchell, believe it or not, at this point, because I think there's more of a path to the number one back in his backfield than there is for Hines. Hines is going to be what he is, and as long as Jonathan Taylor is healthy, of course, we always hope players stay healthy, he's not going to surpass him suddenly at any point in time, whereas Mitchell could suddenly be the number one guy in a run-first offense. So you want to get him. If it was a situation where you're choosing between the two, I feel like your waiver priority is much better used on a guy like Mitchell than it is on a guy like Hines at this point for both of those reasons. So, Bill, you say awesome breakdown. I appreciate that. I was just about to move on to the next chat when you said that, but I always try to get those in. Do thank you. And, of course, Bill's one of our regulars here, so I know that Bill has had a very good fantasy season last year and is looking to back that up again this season. Another one of our regulars here, Ilias Giftopoulos. Welcome back, Ilias. You say, should I make this trade Chubb and Thielen for CEH, Keenan Allen, and Deebo Samuel in PPR? You get the Chubb side. I think that I like the Chubb side better of what I'm seeing here. I think Adam Thielen is underrated. The person who gets the spotlight in Minnesota is going to be Justin Jefferson. Adam Thielen continues to put up solid production. I think he had 9 or 10 targets. So it was not only obviously he had 2 touchdowns, and there's been a lot of talk about the fact that Thielen had all those touchdowns last year. I don't think you necessarily need to look at him as a guy who just happened to capitalize on a couple of red zone opportunities and find the end zone. That's really not what he has been. 9 or 10 targets is solid. That gives you a level of consistency that you can look to. And there are a lot of players who don't see him that way and therefore may make that trade with you. Nick Chubb is a player that I love. Absolutely. I think this Cleveland is a good team and a run-first team, and I think they're going to have leads in a lot of games this year. And even though Kareem Hunt is there, I think Chubb is going to get his share of the work. I don't think Hunt is going to take away from Chubb's fantasy production. If you remember last year when Chubb was healthy, even though he missed a lot of time, he still had a pretty solid season. So I absolutely think that the best players in this deal that you're laying out here are Chubb and Thielen. I like Keenan Allen a lot. Keenan Allen is probably just a touch above Thielen in terms of where they fall this season, I would think. But when you're making a trade, you have to kind of balance what you're giving up and what you're getting there. And so if you're giving up Keenan Allen and replacing him with Adam Thielen, I don't think that's a huge step down. You're taking a big step up from CEH to Nick Chubb, in my opinion. We haven't seen the production there in Kansas City for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Certainly he wasn't drafted as high this year as he was last year with the rookie hype that he had there. But to me, Nick Chubb is a big step up. Deebo Samuel, is that level of production going to stay there all year long? You certainly can't expect it's going to be quite at that level. He'll probably still have, a decent amount of production there. But you're taking advantage of that big game to make a deal that favors you. I like this trade, Ilias. This is a really well thought out trade, and I hope that the person that you're working with is kind of recognizing that. And if he's someone that needs more depth at the wide receiver spot, which I'm assuming that's why I'm assuming you are offering this trade. And I'm guessing that you've probably, one of the things when you're making trades is that the people that you trade with, you see such a difference in the ones who understand how to get these deals and ones who just try to throw out anybody and hoping that someone will stupidly give up something that they shouldn't. I mean, you have to really understand when you're looking at other teams what they need. You've got to make this deal lucrative to them. So, Ilias, I'm guessing you've looked at a player that needs more depth at the wide receiver spot, and by giving that person two good players back, Keenan Allen is a good player, and Deebo will have decent production. You're taking advantage of that to kind of get a step up in the area that you likely need in Nick Chubb. So I like this deal a lot. I hope that you're able to get this, Ilias. Stop back with us on a future chat and let me know if you're able to get that deal. I do think you're getting the best players, and a lot of times that's a good way to evaluate these trades is who's getting the best player. And to me, the best player out of these 5 that you've listed is Nick Chubb, and Adam Thielen is not that far down from Keenan Allen. So what you're giving up here is Deebo Samuel. you're losing one wide receiver, and you probably have enough that's not a huge loss for you. So yeah, I like this trade a lot, and hopefully that's something that you're able to get. So yeah, good luck to you on that one, Ilias. Hope you're 1-0 starting off the season this year as well. All right, again, before I get to this next chat, I'm going to put up this notification first, just letting you guys all know that this is Tuesday waiver show for TFF Live. We do have a lot of content to talk about the waiver wire, but as we always do, we're here for the chats. So even if we have other content, I'm going to try to get to these chats first. We can always continue to give you that content. So if you are watching the show on replay, or if you're waiting for more information on waivers, we will get to that. But I'm going to get to all the people that are in the chat right now and try to work with their questions, and we'll mix in the rest of the content as we go. So I just want to let everyone know about that. The live chat will remain open throughout the show. Feel free to drop in your chats as we go. Looking to Takashi 6400 next. What are your thoughts on my trade? Mark Andrew and Ronald Jones for DJ Moore. This happened before week 1. Guessing that means that you picked up DJ Moore, who had a nice week 1. I can't say that I'm really high on Mark Andrews at the tight end spot, but that's not necessarily because of Mark Andrews. It's kind of because I'm just not high on the tight end spot. I just think the tight end spot is so frustrating to play every year. And if you're not a person who tries to really go out and get a top guy, which I'm not, if you don't have a Travis Kelce or a 19-target Darren Waller from last night, and even George Kittle, if you're past those players and you don't have one, then to me it's like there's a tremendous drop-off. And I know that Mark Andrews has had some good production, but that consistent production, I don't know that it's there. So if you're trading away a Mark Andrews for a receiver that can be beneficial to your team, if you have anything that you could plug in at tight end, or even if you're willing to stream tight ends, I think you can fill that spot. Ronald Jones is an absolute question mark for Tampa Bay. I saw that Bruce Arians today named him as starter, but he certainly seems to have a short leash there. So who knows with Fournette and now Gio Bernard lurking, what is Rojo going to do for you? How can you predictably start him at all throughout this season without seeing something change? And we went the whole season last year and we waited to see that change and it didn't happen. So yeah, you've got rid of a running back that I'm assuming that I'm looking at this the right way, that you traded away Andrews and Rojo. You got rid of a running back that you can't predict when you're going to use him. You got rid of a tight end that is, a good tight end, but, it's not like any other than the top tight ends, they're not going to return you the same value. So yes, you need them in your lineup, but it's just such a frustrating spot to try to play every week. The ability to get an upgrade at another spot like a wide receiver and a DJ Moore. Now, I will say this, DJ Moore is not a player that I personally roster in a lot of leagues. So I know that when I do research for these shows, I try to have, a good idea of a lot of the players across the board, but certainly the players that I have on my own rosters, you kind of build up a little bit more of a feel for what they're doing. And so that DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson situation there, with a new quarterback and a good first game for DJ Moore, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that his targets, I believe he was the target leader, but I do think he had more targets than Robbie Anderson there. He probably, I shouldn't say the target leader because that's probably always going to be Christian McCaffrey. But you're looking at Moore and Anderson in terms of those are the two guys there. If you are seeing Moore outproduce Anderson, then he has value for you. I mean, it's a player that you can use. So, yeah, I think you weighed out on this deal. And I see that your follow-up here says that you have Dallas Goddard, who had a nice first game, and that's a tough situation in Philadelphia because you don't know what Zach Ertz is going to do. I know that I rostered Zach Ertz last year in some leagues, and it was ugly. And certainly if Goddard kind of emerges as more the guy there, then he's going to fill some spots, and you can work that waiver wire to find other players here and there. I have a couple of tight ends on the waiver wire list that I'm going to go through tonight that I think are going to be some value. I even have a real deep sleeper on the tight end list. That's a sneak preview once we get to the rest of the content there. So, something that you can look for if you need to look in another direction besides Goddard, after losing Andrews. So, yeah, my thoughts on your trade are I like it. I think you got a good pickup there. I don't know if you started DJ Moore in week 1, but if you did, you probably had a good week out of him. So, yeah, I think you've done well. But, again, I say this with a lot of people on these streams. So you guys, if you're out here watching these streams, you're doing your homework. fantasy football is all about opinions. I always say that, I certainly don't believe that my opinion is the only one, but you guys are out there looking for this information and actively finding it. And that's what gives you the advantage as the season goes on. So if you're able to get these trades, that I'm sure that you've done your homework already, and it probably is going to work out for you. So that's good. That's what we always want to see. And you say you did start him over AB, which obviously Antonio Brown had a nice game this week as well. But yeah, if you got Brown and Moore, you got two players who are, in my opinion, spot starters, unless Antonio Brown just continues to prove that he's going to be a main guy again. You can play your matchups throughout the year between both of those guys and sit one when they have a tough matchup in favor of the other. You got some options there. You got some depth. I think you've done well for your roster. So I hope that works out well for you, Takashi. I'm glad to hear that you were able to make a nice deal there. Let's take the chat from Nick Navarro here. I think, Nick, you have been on the stream before, so if you have been, welcome back. If I'm wrong and you're new, then welcome either way. You say, should I make these trades in full PPR 12 team? Let's take a look. Robert Woods and Dak Prescott for Justin Herbert and Calvin Ridley. Also, Robbie Anderson and Trey Seeming for, I believe you probably mean Trey Sermon. Damn, autocorrect gotcha, I think there. Trey Sermon for Justin Jefferson. I like Dak Prescott a lot, but I also like Justin Herbert. Prescott is to me the better of those two players in that deal. And in order to balance that deal, you're getting Ridley and giving up Woods, which is an upgrade on the Ridley side. I'm high on Calvin Ridley this year. The first game was not good. Matt Ryan did not play well. That can't continue for the entire season. I think Matt Ryan has got to be better than that. I expect Calvin Ridley to be pushing the top guys this year. I think he's been on the rise and on the ascend. And I really feel like, your Devontae Adams, your Tyreek Hills, I think that Calvin Ridley has the opportunity to be in that ball game for this season. He's got to get better quarterback play. If he does, you just look at what he did last year in terms of his target share when Julio wasn't there, and he had almost 5 targets a game more without Julio. It was around 11 per game was the stat. If he can keep that up, obviously, you have Kyle Pitts there. I don't expect Kyle Pitts to make it worse off for Ridley. I think he's going to have some opportunity there, but I don't think it's gonna make Ridley's production go down. So I absolutely like Ridley in that trade, and I think Justin Herbert from Dak is going to have, I think, a big year. Hopefully he stays healthy, but that Dallas offense is, I think, going to be forced to throw the ball the entire season. I don't know where they're at with Zeke right now. There's some concern, I think, and also if they're not a better team than they were last year, they're going to be trailing all the time. And with the amount of weapons that they have, if they're trailing, they're going to throw the ball to keep up with these other teams. So you're going to have big games from Dak, big games from their receivers. So it would be losing him wouldn't be great, but you're getting a very good player behind him in Justin Herbert. I know his first week wasn't, in terms of fantasy points, it wasn't quite as much, but he still had a nice over 330 yards passing, only had the 1 touchdown. So that was why his points weren't there. I think you're going to be fine to slot in Herbert if you can get Ridley for Woods. Woods is a player that I've always felt like has been a little bit frustrating in understanding when to start him, trying to predict when he's going to have good games. So I think you're getting the better side of that deal in that particular trade if you can get it. Robbie Anderson and Trey Sermon for Justin Jefferson. If that is who you mean, Trey Sermon, I think that I don't see a follow-up here just to say if that's what who you are talking about. I think that would be great if you could get Jefferson, but I would be thinking that the person that you're trading would be less likely to make that deal with you, considering what happened in week 1 with Sermon. That might be a deal that you have to kind of wait on a little while and maybe, consider that you are going to try for it, but potentially wait for Sermon to have a nice game first and kind of prove himself. And then you can try to maybe make that happen at that point. Because I think trying to make it happen now, potentially that player that you're offering it to might close the door on getting it later if they see that trade and they think that it's not enough value for them. Then they may consider it later on if Sermon has a big game. But at this point, they might look at it as, this is not – I'm not going to make this trade ever because it's being offered to me now for a guy who was scratched in the first game. So I think that's one of those that you kind of put on the shelf and see what happens later on, understanding that things happen all the time in fantasy football. Justin Jefferson could have great games, and it could make it so that they're never going to trade him away, or he could continue to have just kind of middling games, and the person that you're looking to trade with later on might make that offer or make that offer happen for you. So I do think you'd be getting the better player there. I just don't think that I don't think that's a trade that, let's put it this way. If that was offered to me right now, I don't know that I would take a Trey Sermon without knowing what's going to happen in that backfield. So yeah, I think that's one of them you got to put on the shelf. The other one I think you can try to pull the trigger on and see if you can get it, because I do think that will be in your favor. I do see that you follow up and say yes, Sermon. Hope that helps you, Nick. Some good thoughts for you. Glad to have you on the stream. Look forward to seeing you on future streams as well. We got Vansco, one of our regulars, back. I think first time, Vansco, you've been with us this season. So you say good to see you again. Hope your year went well, and I say good to see you as well. I know that you have been had a lot going on with your fantasy leagues last year, so hope you're off to a good start this year. I'm going to go. I know I see a couple of other ones before your next one, but I'm going to go ahead and jump to your follow-up next. You say, in one league, I'm in trouble running back-wise. CMC and Gaskin are now your starters. I like that. I had Mostert, and my bench is J.D. McKissick. Chuba Hubbard is a handcuff. What are your RB targets? I'm 10th on waivers. I don't think this is a great week for running backs. I only have 2 in my top 5, and that will be we haven't gotten through all of that content yet. But my number 1 waiver wire player to go after is going to be Elijah. I almost called him Mackenzie Mitchell. That's a new player. I got to get used to these names. I don't think you're going to get him at 10. The only other running back that I have that I've even made note of this week is Mark Ingram for Houston. And I don't feel like Ingram is I don't feel like he's going to produce as well down the road. The situation in Houston is bad. I can't imagine they're going to be winning a lot of games the way they did this last week where the volume is enough. And you've got a lot of players there. Ingram did get most of the work. I don't know if that continues every week with Phillip Lindsay there, and I don't think David Johnson really works in the mix much there at all. But I think that this is probably, if you're 10th, this is probably a week where you've got to let that waiver number build up some. And in that case, you might have somebody available to you later on, should there be a situation that happens. Who are other players who are out there on your waiver wire that are not among the players that I listed? I have drafted Michael Carter in just about every league this year, and I'm stashing him right now to see what happens there with the Jets. I think that's a player that a lot of others have been talking about as well. A rookie that could turn out to be something, and that's one of those players that you take a shot on in a draft, and if they don't do anything, you just cut him. He probably is not available. I think in one of my leagues he actually is still available, which is kind of surprising. So perhaps he's out there. Probably not. I think you're going to see a lot of situations happen as you would in any year with running backs throughout the course of the year. So you kind of just have to keep an eye on. I don't know if there's a real solid player out there that you can plug in right now. It might be a little bit where you're kind of trying to figure it out as the weeks go by here. I think you're actually fine with, I really like Myles Gaskin. So at least you got your RB1 and 2 filled there. And if you're able to have a wide receiver in your flex while you kind of work through that situation, then great. Other than that, you have the potential to go out and find, a player that you don't have to spend your waiver priority on, that you can just have sitting there just in case. I'm looking on my grids to see if there is anybody out there. Tony Jones in New Orleans, I guess, is someone that you could just put out there and just kind of hold on to and see what happens. I'm guessing you've already had your Baltimore players are gone. Latavius Murray and Tyson Williams have probably already been taken. I'm just looking on my grids to see if there's anybody else that I see that is kind of in that realm. Tarik Cohen, when he comes back from injury, is probably going to have a little bit of value there. Might be someone to look at. You can probably stash him in an IR spot, and that way you can keep the same amount of players on your roster if you have IR. That would be a reasonable place to look. Where else do I see? Tony Pollard with the Zeke situation, if he's available somewhere, probably not available, but you never know. I can't say that I'm seeing a lot of other players here as I look through my grids that could fill that spot. So perhaps a Carlos Hyde can turn in that situation in Jacksonville is weird. I don't know what's going on. Those are kind of names that are kind of popping into my head. But yeah, I see where you're at with this one. It's a tough one. And your follow-up here says we were feeling the same way. Might just see how things play out. James White is still on the waiver wire. Might want to gamble on him. Yeah, I think you take a shot on James White and keep him on your bench. And that way you have somebody there should you need. You certainly don't want to have just 2 that you feel like are playable. At least James White is playable. Again, I don't have his numbers, but I do believe he had an okay day the first week, along with Damian Harris there for New England. So yeah, I think that's a player that makes sense to me. That's available. There may not be many others that are available out there. It's running back situation is tough if you don't get him. That's why we all draft him so high. So when you lose a guy like Mostert, it's tough. But hopefully you can fill that spot. Good luck to you, Vansco. Hope you have a good season. Hope you're off to a good start, and glad to have you back on the stream. All right, let's see what we got here. Bill Romanowski, T.Y. Hilton is on the IR. I'm picking up for my IR roster slot. May never take him off. Desperation move. I don't think that's a bad move at all. I mean, I think that it's a smart play if you're already going to be making a move on the waiver wire, and you don't need your IR at the time, it doesn't ever hurt you to find someone that's currently on the IR and pick them up first and then move them over. Unless you're playing in a league where your moves are limited, that's always a good play. I like to do that myself a lot of times. So if you can find a player out there who is on the IR and just kind of wait for them when they get back. Tarik Cohen is another player that you would think of at this point that you kind of did the same thing with. He's probably not taken in most leagues. That would be my guess without looking. You can slide him into that IR spot, and then you continue to work that waiver wire with other players in the meantime. So I like the thought there with T.Y. Hilton, and you never know, because when you look at the stats in Indy this last week, their passing game in terms of downfield passing was not all that. It's pretty non-existent. A lot of their targets went to their backfield. So certainly I think Carson Wentz would prefer to have a T.Y. Hilton type player there later on in the year. So we'll see how that works out. Takashi 6400, your wide receivers are Tyreek, Cup, DJ, AB. It's a 3-receiver league. So this is going back to your earlier one. Tyreek Hill certainly in good shape. Cooper Kupp in good shape. Moore and Brown. So it's a 3-receiver league. You've got options there. You've got choices based on matchups. So I think you're in good shape there. I like that a lot. Certainly Tyreek Hill had a great week, as always. Let me see. I see Nick Navarro said appreciate it. And as always, I say thank you, Nick, for being on the stream. We appreciate you guys being here in the chat. Brad is here. Brad, you might be a new viewer. So if you are, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you. You say, should I trade CEH and Mike Davis for Najee Harris? I had higher hopes for Najee Harris starting this season. I did not get him in any of my leagues in drafts. I would have drafted him. But that first week for Pittsburgh didn't show me that anything's different than it was last year with James Conner there. The offensive line has been well talked about, that it's an issue. They don't know where things are at there. CEH, I don't know that has the upside that Najee Harris has. But right now we don't know what Najee Harris's floor is. I don't know where they're at. I feel like Pittsburgh is going to end up with a similar offense with Roethlisberger throwing a lot of short passes, and that means the same guys are going to be in play as were in play before. Harris might be one of those guys. You'd think he would get a good bundle of those. I think you could make this deal. I think you need to have a lot of depth right now at running back if you're going to make this deal, because I don't feel like the upside of Harris is enough to lose the depth that you have with CEH and Mike Davis. Mike Davis is probably not going to wow anybody with huge games, but you would expect him to be the main guy in Atlanta and continue to have volume and give you a nice solid floor. You might argue that Mike Davis's floor is a little bit more predictable right now than Najee Harris's floor is. He just doesn't have the upside. So if you have a lot of depth at running back and you can do this and take a shot in the hopes that Harris kind of does start to produce there, which he may, then I think you can make this deal. But I think you have to have depth in order to make this. I wouldn't sacrifice your depth for this deal right now unless you really feel high on Harris. In that case, it would be a buy low situation with somebody who might have him who might be frustrated with the first week. So I guess it just kind of depends on what your particular situation there is. I would say if you don't have the depth, then I might be more hesitant to do this. If you do have the depth and you're kind of taking a shot at a player that you believe in, then that might be a different story. Either way you go there, Brad, I do hope that the players you go with, they do crush it for you, and do appreciate having you on the stream as well. Look forward to seeing you in future streams. Let's see here. Vansco jumps back in and says, I appreciate your insight greatly. I went 2 for 4 in my leagues week 1, but learned from those losses. I know that you've had a real good season last year, Vansco, so I'm sure you're looking for another good season to back that up this year. So absolutely wish you luck there, and thank you for being back on the chat with us again. Kyle Ellis is here. We got a chat for him. 8-man PPR. Welcome to the stream, Kyle. I believe you are a return viewer. Welcome back. If not, welcome either way, but glad to have you. 8-man PPR. Trade Dak and Tyson Williams for Josh Allen. We start 3 running back, 3 wide receivers. You have Henry, Aaron Jones, Mixon, Carson. Wow. You got in an 8-team league, you're going to have a little bit more in terms of players. Henry Jones, Mixon, Carson is flex, so I don't think Tyson will ever get into the lineup. So you're essentially looking at trading Dak for Josh Allen. Certainly Josh Allen is expected to be a top player again this year. The first game was somewhat not what you would have expected. And for those of you that have been on the stream here before, you might know that I am up in Buffalo, so I am Bills Mafia. Fantasy football is a different story. Josh Allen's year last year was I don't know how much talk there is about this around the rest of the country in terms of Josh Allen. But I think there's some wonder about whether fans being back in the stadium changes things a little bit for Josh Allen. Perhaps the way things were last year kind of produced a calm in him that allowed his talents to show. And I'm not going to say that I feel like that's in jeopardy this year, but I feel like it is a little bit of a question if his season is different when he is a little bit more amped than he might have been last year. If he's able to kind of find that even level where he can produce the way he did under these circumstances, then of course he's going to be great. Dak Prescott is going to have a really good year. He doesn't have the run game that Josh Allen does, so he's not going to give you that portion of those points. But I mean, Dak Prescott, they're going to throw the ball if you just look at the way they started last year, I mean, have you seen anything in Dallas that looks different than what it was to start last season in terms of how that team is structured and what they're going to do? Like, so far we don't see Zeke putting up all that much. And we see them, it's only one game, of course, against Tampa Bay, who's a very good team. But you see the same thing. It's a team that is forced to throw the ball because they're playing from behind with tons of weapons. So when they're forced to throw the ball, they have the guys that are going to make it so that Dak is going to have big games. I don't think that unless Josh Allen absolutely repeats to the same level as last year, I don't think it's a huge step up from Dak to Josh Allen. The potential is there, but I think the potential is there for Dak too. So what you're saying in this trade here, I guess my answer is the Tyson Williams part. I totally get that. I actually think Latavius Murray is going to end up being the main guy in Baltimore there once he's had more time with the team. I think that if Tyson Williams was going to be the main guy, I think you would have heard more about him before all the injuries than you did. So I do think that they're going to work Murray in, and that means trading away Tyson Williams now would make some sense. I guess the only part of this trade that I'm curious about is how much do you favor Josh Allen over Dak? If you really favor Josh Allen over Dak, then absolutely. But if you have any thoughts, like kind of what I'm talking about, wanting to see how Josh Allen responds this year first, then perhaps table this for a little while. And the problem is if you table this, like your value for Tyson Williams is going to go away. So you're probably forced into making this decision now. So I understand your question. I certainly don't think it's a wrong move to pick up a Josh Allen over Dak. But I also think that don't discount what Dak can do this year either if you decide to go the other way. I guess what I'm saying here is either way you go on this, I think you're going to be okay. If you really want to have Josh Allen on your team, then I can't fault you for making this move. And if you're not able to get that trade, then I don't think that it's going to hurt you to have Dak instead of Josh Allen either. So, yeah, it's kind of a personal preference. If you really like the Josh Allen side, go for it and try to get him. And if not, I think you're still okay. But that would be my thoughts on that. And again, Kyle Ellis, glad to have you on the stream, and best of wishes for the season. And stop back on future streams. Let us know how they're going, or just jump in and chat, talk fantasy football with us. Appreciate that. Vansco jumps back in here and says, what are your thoughts on Nyheim Hines this season? I think a decent spot starter in Indianapolis, especially if you're in a PPR league. I certainly don't think that – I think Jonathan Taylor is going to have a nice season. He's a player that I drafted in a bunch of leagues, so I certainly hope he has a nice season as well. I think Hines will continue to produce value, kind of along the same lines of like a J.D. McKissic type player. He's going to be your pass catcher out of the backfield. I don't expect him to go away. I don't expect him to necessarily have a lot of big games, but he'll probably be a guy that you can keep around and fill up your bye weeks with him and look for good matchups where you might be able to use him, sort of a matchup play, spot starter. I think he's a player that you can continue to roster. I know that I think I have him on one roster right now myself. Perhaps he's out there on some waiver wires as well. But Indy, to me, is a team that seems to, in the past years, have had a good offensive line play to where their run game can carry their offense. And what we've seen so far from Carson Wentz coming back from injury is that kind of has been the case, where a lot of the targets went to the backfield this past week. So I think you're going to continue to see that. And if that's the case, that means that Hines has production for you. So especially in a PPR league. So I think Hines is a guy you can keep around. And especially if you're a player who rosters Jonathan Taylor, he's not only someone that can help you out when you need him, but is also available as a handcuff as well. So I think Nyheim Hines is still a very viable player in most leagues. And let me get your follow-up here. I do see you just jumped in this one last question. No, you don't feel like you have to say one last question. This is what we're here for. You feel free. The chat is for you guys. That's why we're here. So you say Antonio Brown and Chase. You're going to have to explain to me if you mean Jamar Chase or Chase Claypool. Antonio Brown and Chase for Terry McLaurin, same league. Starting wide receivers are Chase, AB, Woods, Ayuk, and Chanel off the bench. So I'm lacking it at wide receiver for an 8-man. Let me look up to where you were before here. I see you're really strong at running back. Wide receivers, Brown. I'm going to assume you're talking Jamar Chase there. That's just going to be my assumption. I loved Terry McLaurin going into this year, but things have changed now with Ryan Fitzpatrick getting hurt. I really thought that this was going to be a great situation for McLaurin, and you say Jamar Chase, so I guessed correctly there. Thank you for that. I'm not sure on what happens at this point because Terry McLaurin over his past seasons, it's been this continual quarterback carousel type thing going on. And I really felt that Fitzpatrick was a really good style quarterback for McLaurin's game from fantasy purposes. Fitzpatrick was going to sling it and was going to give his receivers chances. And I feel like Terry McLaurin is that good of a talent that he's going to take advantage of all of those chances that he gets. And with the younger quarterbacks, they may not be willing to take those same chances. So I feel like losing Fitzpatrick did hurt McLaurin quite a bit this year. Now, hopefully he still produces. I know he's a player that I've drafted in at least one league. I'm not sure if I have more than one. And I do think he's a great player. But I think that Jamar Chase is going to be a good player this year. And I don't know that you can still continue to probably use AB, at least in a spot starter role. I can't say that with Fitzpatrick gone that I feel like there is a tremendous uptick between Chase and McLaurin. I think Chase has a very good chance to end up being the number one guy in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. We already saw him off to a very good start. I kind of thought T. Higgins was going to be the number one guy there, but all three of those guys I think are going to have value. And if one of them emerges as the main guy and the other two are still relevant, I think it's very possible that Chase is that guy. So I don't know that I would let go of him right now for a player that there's some uncertainty like there is a Terry McLaurin right now. I think you might want to wait and see what happens with Chase because I think he is going in a good direction here. And I don't know if you can say the same thing about McLaurin. Nothing of his fault, but if you looked at what you thought about McLaurin starting the year and what you think now, I think you probably have to say that it's not in the direction you would want him to be. So I don't know that you want to give up on a guy who is going in the right direction. And I understand trying to get some more receivers there, but I think Chase is the guy that, and I know I have him in a couple of leagues, and I've kind of waited to see what was going to happen the first week, and he started moving in my starting lineups already over some other more established players. So I don't know that you want to let go on him quite yet. And Antonio Brown can get you some help there. Robert Woods is a player that is always confusing to me in terms of trying to predict when to start him, but he's going to be in your lineup. So if you have 3 wide receivers, you're going to start Woods probably every week. You're going to probably be able to start Jamar Chase every week. And then Brandon Ayuk, who knows what happens there. I couldn't even start to think about trying to predict whether or not what's going to happen for his season there. Who knows? You probably can't let go of him at this point. Now, if you could make this deal with Ayuk instead of Chase, that's different. Or if you could make this deal with, well, I wouldn't even do probably Woods, but if somehow you could get this deal with Ayuk instead of Chase, like if Brandon Ayuk comes back and has a really big game, but you don't like his consistency as much, then you're probably going to have more consistency out of McLaurin. You just might not have as much ceiling anymore. So that's a possibility if you can kind of make that happen sometime later on down the road. But if it were me, and again, I always say this, I try to back up my opinion with some information so that it's not just me saying, this is what I think. But I like to try to talk through things and give you thoughts that might help you make these decisions that you feel are best. I think Jamar Chase is the guy that you kind of want to see what happens at this point, especially if you went out and drafted him and he got off to a good start. I think there may be good things ahead for him. So I might hold off. I know McLaurin is a great player, but I might hold off on that one. Hope that helps you out. Icerel, I missed your question. I did not intend to do that. I will jump back and get you. I see that you jump back in there. So I will go ahead and answer your question. Kyle Ellis, good luck with you with that trade. Let me know how it works out, and whichever players you go with there. I do hope they crush it for you. All right, Icerel, welcome to the stream. You say trade A-Rob for Thielen and Darrell Henderson. If you could get that trade, then yeah, you're getting a lot of value. But I'm not sure that. I don't know if that's a trade you can get right now. I think Darrell Henderson is a player that's got a lot of value, and Adam Thielen is coming off of a great week, and A-Rob is not. So I think that's a tough trade to get somebody to agree to, unless you have somebody that absolutely is just going to agree to just about any trade at all. Certainly if you could get it, then great. It would be in your favor. I just don't know that somebody's going to trade away those two guys just for Allen Robinson at this point. So I think that might be a tough one, but absolutely, if you can go out and try and get it, you say you already did it. All right. Well, I guess you got the good side of it then. That's, I'm surprised, but hey, if you can get those trades and someone's willing to make them, that must be a fan of Allen Robinson. So you say A-Rob had Jalen Ramsey on him. I understand that's part of it, and it also has to do with the quarterback situation in Chicago that's going to be in flux throughout the year. But you got a good side of that. I think Adam Thielen is going to continue to produce, and I certainly think that Darrell Henderson has a lot of value this year for the Rams. So that's a good trade for you, Icerel. I hope that continues to work out for you as the season goes along. Bill Romanowski says smash that like button. I appreciate that, Bill. Obviously, as we always say, the likes and the subscribes certainly help out the channel a whole lot, so we do appreciate that. And once again, we do have, he says, nobody can beat me in the Pick 6 Challenge. That gives me a good chance to kind of put up a little bit of information for you on the Pick 6 Challenge here. It's called 6 Picks. It is available in the description area right now for this week, for week 2. There's a link there for you, so you can go there and click on that whenever you would like, if you're watching live or if you're watching on replay. The idea here is that there's 6 matchups within the same games. Pick the winners to all 6 matchups. Leave your picks in the comments section on that video. They need to be on that video in order for them to count for the game. It's PPR scoring, and essentially you're just picking the player that you feel is going to have the better fantasy day of each of those 6 matchups. We will keep those standings all season long, and those picks will close at 1 o'clock Eastern time on Sundays. And Bill Romanowski is the current leader who's with us tonight in the chat. So all you other guys out there, go out there and climb that leaderboard and see if you can take over that top spot as we go into week 2 and beyond. Thank you, Bill, for giving me the opportunity to give that promo. Again, it's called 6 Picks, and it's just a brand new game that we've started this year, and hopefully you guys all like it. All right, let me see here. Icerel says, I also traded James Robinson, DJ Moore, and Tyler Higbee for Darren Waller. Well, I mean, James Robinson's first week was not what we wanted it to be. So that's interesting as to what's going to happen there. I don't know how that's going to play out. So I think that if it doesn't work out as well as it did last year, then you've done okay here. Waller, obviously 19 targets this week. Waller is going to be a great player, it looks like, again, for the entire season. So it certainly is a huge upgrade over Tyler Higbee. DJ Moore is a player who has some decent value throughout the year, but he might be a player that you're kind of playing matchups with, here and there, rather than an every week starter. So yeah, I don't have Darren Waller in any of my leagues. Certainly feel a little bit unfortunate about that at this point, because the way he started the year, it looks like it's going to be huge on that one. So in terms of the best player in that trade is Darren Waller, and you certainly got him there. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that one. I think you're in line for some real good production from Waller throughout the season. All right, let me go ahead and jump over to getting some our content out of the way here, as we've gotten a whole bunch of chats here. And I see your chat here, Vansco. Let me hit up a little content here, because we haven't done too much of this yet, and then I'll get back to your chat after that, Vansco. We started with the top 5 waiver wire players, and we already talked about Elijah Mitchell, who I feel is the #1 player on the waiver wire this week, so we won't go through him again. Second on my list in the top 5 this week is Christian Kirk from the Arizona Cardinals. Currently rostered at 14% of all leagues. Last week, 5 targets, 5 catches, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think Kirk is a player who has been kind of on the cusp of having some good production there in Arizona, but has never quite broken through. So perhaps this is a possible year where we see more of that. Again, in the first week here, I feel like the waiver wire, while a lot of times you're taking a look at the waiver wire in terms of what they can give you like in the next couple of weeks, this might be more of a situation where you're trying to figure out, are these players that can return production for the entire year worth taking a shot at this point? I think Christian Kirk falls into that. Taking a look at his schedule coming up, he's got Minnesota, Jacksonville, the Rams, San Francisco. So those first 2 games in terms of matchups, if you look at last year's numbers, Minnesota gave up the 6th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot, and Jacksonville was 12th. Only one game I try to go off of last year instead of this year at this point. So I think Kirk has a couple of good weeks ahead of him. Certainly somebody you might be able to get. You might even be able to get this guy without using your waiver priority this week and saving that up. So I do feel Christian Kirk is warranted in the top 5 for the waiver wire going into week 2 here. Number 3 on my list is Mark Ingram for Houston. I'm not as high on Ingram, but I think he has to make the top 5 because there are so few running backs available right now that could actually give you production. I'm not a believer that Houston's going to be looking at the type of game that we saw them play against Jacksonville, where you can see a 26 rush game for an Ingram, but he did have a nice day. He's got Cleveland this week, who gave up the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs last year, and they did so again this year, so not a great matchup. Carolina at 8th, so a little bit better, but again, you're not going to see – there are not a lot of teams that you're going to expect Houston to be kind of beating the whole way through where you can see that volume. So I've got Ingram on the list simply because, it's tough to find running backs right now, and it might be worth taking a shot. And perhaps he does end up being like the main guy that gets all the work every week there. And if that happens and you get him, then it plays out for you. I do feel like Mitchell has more upside. That's why I got Mitchell at 1 and Ingram at 3. Number 4 on my list this week is Juwan Johnson from New Orleans. This one was a little bit of a back and forth in my mind in terms of where I put him. I think you saw his production this week in terms of fantasy points, 17.1, 2 touchdowns. He had 21 yards receiving, 3 targets only. Jameis didn't really throw the ball all that much, so it's hard to say if this was just a situation because they were leading so much on Green Bay that Johnson might have more involvement as the weeks go on, or he falls off, and when Michael Thomas comes back, you don't see him much at all anymore. Again, this is a player that fits into the kind of that, well, right now, if he does turn into something big, then you're kind of getting somebody at very little cost to you that could really help your team. And that's why he makes the top 5 at the tight end spot. It's difficult to find those players. In terms of his matchups, Carolina this week, 8th most fantasy points allowed to tight ends last year. So it looks like it could be a good matchup there. The following weeks aren't quite as good, but it's kind of one of those players that you can kind of let play out and see where he ends up being. And then number 5 on the top 5 this list this week, I've got Darnell Mooney from the Bears, currently rostered in 48% of all leagues. Last week, 7 targets, 5 catches, only 26 yards. There were some other receivers that I've made note of, but I put Mooney on this list basically because he has a nicer run of games ahead of him. Cincinnati this week, 16th last year in terms of fantasy points to wide receivers, right in the middle. Then Cleveland, who was 8th, and then Detroit, who was 3rd. So he kind of won out over some of the other receivers simply because of the matchups that he has ahead of him. So let's take a look at the top 5 that I've got this week, and here they are. Elijah Mitchell, number 1. I feel he's definitely worth your waiver priority. And then we have Christian Kirk, Mark Ingram, Juwan Johnson, Darnell Mooney. Those are my top 5 waiver wire targets as we go into week 2. I do also have a few bonus names, and we will take a look at that list in a little while after we go through some more of the chats. So that's the top 5. We will stop back for the remainder of those names after we go through some more of our chats. I will go to Vansco. Thank you for waiting here and your patience. I got Trey Lance sitting on the bench in a few leagues just because I think he'll eventually start and be a decent backup. I agree. But Winston is on every waiver wire for me. I'm slightly interested. I think that he's a guy that you can take a flyer on just because it is possible that, Winston has had some good value in the past when he was in Tampa Bay, basically because he's going to sling it. And I don't know that it's going to be all that much different for New Orleans. You would think that the reins on him are going to be a little bit tighter in that offense. And it's hard to say because after 1 week, he had 5 touchdowns, but he didn't really have to throw it that much. So, yeah, I could understand where you're interested. I can certainly, if you have a spot on your bench, I don't know if I would cut Trey Lance for Jameis Winston because I really like those quarterbacks that give you the run game production. And certainly Lance is one of those guys, and also Justin Fields. And I certainly also think Jalen Hurts is off to a great start this year in that same sort of mold. So, yeah, I understand your interest there. If you've got a spot that's available, I can't blame you for going that way because there could be good things there from Winston. We don't really know exactly. And certainly when Michael Thomas gets back, it's going to change the equation there as well. And you say no worries for me going back to the content. I appreciate that. And thank you, Vansco. Welcome back. Glad to have you back on the streams as well. Get back to Ice Rel here next in line. You think I can start Deebo Samuel every week? I do think that right now. At least in a lower, he's not going to be your WR1. He's not going to repeat that performance every week. But I kind of, in the drafts, I never really thought that Brandon Ayuk was really that far above Deebo Samuel. I mean, I know Deebo has had his injury problems. To me, if he hadn't had those injury problems, would he be considered behind Brandon Ayuk in terms of who is the main guy there? I don't know that he would. So if you were able to get Deebo Samuel a little bit later in your leagues, you've picked up a guy that's got some good potential for you there. I think there are going to be a lot of players that you will start Deebo Samuel over on a week in and week out basis. So yeah, I do think you've got some good value there, and I certainly wouldn't let him go. I would keep him around and look for those matchups. And when they're there, and if you can turn in games like you got this last week, he's a guy that wins games for you on a lot of weeks. So yeah, I like Deebo Samuel a whole lot. I don't have him anywhere in my leagues. I wish that I did. I have Brandon Ayuk in one league, and I'm not all that happy about it at this point. Absolutely, I think Deebo's a great player for you. Joe is in the chat. Welcome, Joe. And you say, should I pick up Kenyon Drake and drop Sony Michelle? I picked up Elijah Mitchell today. Now my backs are Eckler, Mitchell, Tyson Williams, Trey Sermon, Tony Pollard, Tony Jones, and Sony Michelle. I'm guessing, Joe, that you are playing probably in a pretty deep league with all of these names, and with the fact that Eckler is your main guy, and in a league that's not as deep, you probably have another big name to go with it. How do I feel about Kenyon Drake? I don't know. I was very hesitant about Josh Jacobs this year because of Kenyon Drake. That being said, I absolutely did not enjoy having Kenyon Drake on my rosters last year. Different situation, obviously, in Arizona than it is now. With Kyler Murray taking up so many of those goal line runs, it was not a good one for Kenyon Drake in terms of fantasy last year. I don't think that Sony Michelle has a huge role in LA behind Darrell Henderson. I didn't think that going in. I know that I drafted Henderson in a lot of leagues thinking he was going to be the main guy. So far, it seems like that's the way it's gone. I don't think that you necessarily have to hold on to Sony Michelle at this point if you need to drop somebody. And if you're looking at the rest of those players on your list, I don't know which other of those players you would drop instead of Sony Michelle. I think even Tony Jones. I'm sure some of Tony Jones' production this week was in a kind of mop-up duty because they had such a big lead. I didn't see all that game, so I don't know if they were mixing him in more with Alvin Kamara. But if they perhaps do, he could return you some volume. Could return you some value. I'm sorry, instead of volume. So yeah, if you're looking to drop one of those running backs that you have listed off there, to me it's Sony Michelle. I think he only had like 1 carry this last game. I don't have the stats in front of me, but when I did look at them, I was surprised at how little they actually used him for. Is he still learning the offense there? Possibly, but I think Darrell Henderson is their guy. Kenyon Drake can probably give you some PPR value. I don't know if it's a PPR league, but it looks like he's probably going to be the guy that's going to catch passes for them over Josh Jacobs. So, yeah, I would think that, Kenyon Drake is certainly going to return you more value than Sony Michelle would. So I would say, yeah, I would go for it. I don't think that Michelle – are you going to feel bad later on because you lost Sony Michelle? I mean, the only situation where that probably is if there's some sort of an unfortunate injury to Darrell Henderson. I think Henderson's going to continue. And you follow up and you say 3 flex league and you went wide receiver heavy. Okay, understand that. Yeah, but I guess my answer to your question is, yeah, I don't see it for Sony Michelle right now. I don't, for some reason, if you cut him, I doubt someone else is going to go out there and pick him up. So if you decided somewhere down the road you wanted to get him back, it's probably a good chance you're going to still be able to do that. So yeah, I think you can safely make that move. Thank you for the chat, Joe. Appreciate you being on the stream. If you're a new viewer here, I look forward to seeing you on future streams as well. All right, this next one, I always try to get names as best as I can to try to get them right. I hope that I do. Sometimes I'll ask you guys if I get them right to just say so, and don't be afraid if I get them wrong. I try my best. I can probably pronounce Zachary, but let me try this next name. Let me just give it a shot. Churinkin. Zachary Churinkin. That's what I'm going with. Hope I got it right there for you, Zachary. Thank you for being on the stream. Glad to have you with us. I think you're probably a new viewer, so welcome. You say trade question. Devonta Smith and Chris Carson for Zeke. PPR league. Which side wins? Well, thank you. Correct, my man. I appreciate that. I always like to try to get these right. I don't like to not have the names be correct. I feel bad about that. So I'm glad that was a good guess on my part. Here's what I think on this one. I thought that Devonta Smith was a great draft flyer. The situation in Philadelphia, there seemed to be a clear path to Smith being the number 1 receiver there if he plays well this year. You got a good young quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who I think is going to work well with him. Chris Carson is a player that I've liked a lot in past years. You would expect to be a very consistent player for the Seahawks. And Zeke is a huge question mark for me. To me, the side that wins this trade is Smith and Carson. I am not really high on Zeke this year. I think it's very possible that he returns to form. But at the same time, he's working in an offense where they're going to end up having to pass it a lot. I'm gonna do this. I have from a previous show. I still have a soundbite saved here that I'm going to play for you from Mike McCarthy talking about Zeke, which I found very curious. So I want to play this, and you tell me what you think about the way he talks about how Zeke played in that first game.
I thought Zeke had a solid game. He did all the heavy lifting. He had some really hard looks in the run game. But his pass protection and I thought he didn't get the touches that you probably would like to. I think there's some extension in the pass game, or maybe there'd be more opportunities moving forward. But Zeke's a complete football player. I mean, I clearly understand the amount of success he had rushing the football early in his career, but he's a joy to work with. I love the way he goes about it. He's in great shape. He does all the little things. He has great understanding of the game. It's very instinctive, and so we just gotta give him some more touches.
Yeah, I know sometimes coach speak is what it is, but this kind of concerned me. Like the part about understanding that Zeke had a lot of production, I think early in his career, or somehow was the way he phrased it. What does that say to you? Is that a coach that's not sure if Zeke is still giving the same level of production as a runner that he was in the past? Because that's what I took from that. Like, I would have rather heard something along the lines of, Zeke's a great player. He went up against a really tough run defense in Tampa Bay. We're going to work him back in the offense. We know that he's going to produce for us. and we believe in him, and we believe in him still being a team leader. That's what I would have wanted to hear if I was looking at, and I believe those comments were on Friday. I don't think that was right after the game on Thursday. I think that was the next day, or it might have been Saturday, but I don't think it. I think it was Friday. Just to me, that doesn't sound like a guy that's confident. And we've seen Tony Pollard continue to get more of a role in that offense. So, the whole, what do we think about Zeke thing? If you look beyond just the actual production and the actual fantasy points, a soundbite like that doesn't make me overconfident in that guy as a player. Now, hopefully he turns it around. But, does it seem like that offense is going the other way where they just want to go lean on the pass? We're talking about Zeke doing little things, that are not involving, his actual run game or his touches. That's not what I wanted to hear a coach say if Ezekiel Elliott was a guy that I was rostering in fantasy leagues. So my answer is this. I like the side of this trade that's Devonta Smith and Chris Carson for the reasons that Carson is a consistent player that you can count on. And if Devonta Smith, who had a good first game already, does turn out to be the main guy in Philadelphia, then you're hitting on somebody, and especially in a PPR league, that is going to produce for you. I like that side. I'm interested, Zachary, in if this is a trade that you've already made, because I know that the way you termed it, I think you were looking to get an answer on which side you like better. Might mean that you were looking to confirm whether or not you made the right deal or not here. That sounds like what the opinion was that you were looking for. So if you're still in the chat, Zachary, I'm interested to know if this is a trade that you already made or if you're thinking about making it, and if so, which side that it is. I will jump around some of these other chats, but if you're still here, I would love to hear that. But that is my thoughts on that one. I like the side of Smith and Carson there for both of those guys, and not just for Zeke's concerns. Vansco, talking about Brandon Ayuk, says that he drafted him in 2 leagues. A lot of concern there. Don't know what to do. Can't get a trade for him. Just have to hope at this point. I didn't think that the frustrations that the San Francisco backfield normally give everybody in fantasy would turn into the same thing for wide receivers there, especially when Ayuk had a good season last year. So, yeah, that's a tough one. Hopefully it's just a situation where they're not happy with him and he works his way back into their good graces. Zachary, you say just on a follow-up here, I'm going to jump back to Rock Out here. I see you there. But sometimes I like to get these follow-ups in. Not a trade you made, a trade proposed to me, and I have Smith and Carson. Yeah, I like the Smith-Carson side of that. As of course, I already said that. But, yeah, interesting to know that trade was proposed to you. It sounds like somebody doesn't want Zeke anymore and hopes that somebody will give back something based on what Zeke has done in the past and not necessarily what he's doing right now. So if Zeke turns it around in future weeks and that same person is willing to trade him away after he has a big game, then you might look at it differently. But right now, what we've seen in 1 week, I think the Smith and Carson on that side is looking pretty good. So I hope that helps you out, Zachary. Either way, as I always say, whichever players you end up with here, I hope they crush it for you. And look forward to seeing you on future streams. Welcome. Glad to have you with us here. Rock Out is up next. Rock Out, welcome to the stream. I don't remember if with lots of different people. I try to remember which people are regulars or which ones return. I'm not sure if Rock Out, if you've been here before or not, but either way, glad to have you with us tonight. You say, would you trade Jefferson and Deontay Johnson? I would get Hill, and the rest of the wide receivers you have are Brown, Corey Davis, Callaway, Marshall, and Judy on IR full PPR. Well, in terms of your depth, certainly in a 2-for-1 there, you're going to lose some depth. I guess it comes down to how confident are you in the Antonio Brown, Corey Davis part of that lineup, because the rest of that lineup, I don't know how much they're giving you at this point. If it's a 2 wide receiver league, then you're still having, Hill, and you can work Antonio Brown and Corey Davis in there. I think Corey Davis had a good first game. If that continues, then I think you're in good shape there. But I really like Justin Jefferson a whole lot this year. And I like Deontay Johnson as well. Having those guys gives you some good depth, especially when you get later on in the year with potential injury situations and bye weeks. Tyreek Hill is a lucrative player to have. So I could see why you would go that route. That's certainly the best player in this trade. So if you're going to evaluate it just on that and you're getting the best player in this trade, then you've done well. At the same time, I don't think that you're in bad shape with Jefferson and Johnson. I think Jefferson is going to be a player that seems to, I mean, even though he didn't have the biggest game between him and Thielen this week, he still produced okay, and I think he's going to have a lot of big games. So I'm not hesitant at all on Justin Jefferson. And Deontay Johnson, to me, is the main guy. I think he's the number one out of those guys in Pittsburgh. I believe he had the most targets last year. I believe he had the most targets last week. I would expect that to continue as long as he's healthy. His health is a concern to me. The first game of the year, and he's already leaving the field. We saw that a bunch last year. To compare that to a guy like Chase Claypool in the same offense, I can't remember Chase Claypool leaving the field. Who knows why certain players have those injury issues. If you have those concerns, then that is more the reason to make this deal. If you feel like you can count on Deontay Johnson week in and week out, which I think you can from a production standpoint, but who knows in terms of injuries, then you're making a massive upgrade in getting Tyreek Hill here. So if you are willing to work your way through the Antonio Brown, Corey Davis, and have that potentially work out for you, Corey Davis certainly could be the number one guy in New York. He's off to a good start with a rookie quarterback. Antonio Brown working with Tom Brady, it seems like they have started to have some good work together there in Tampa Bay, at least to start the year. You are, I think, going to be okay either way on this trade. So I think it's going to be personal preference. If you think you can get Hill and that keeps you from having to worry about Deontay Johnson's injuries on a weekly basis, then I don't think you're wrong to try to make this deal. At the same time, I think you're okay if you don't get it. So I don't think this is a must either way. But whichever side of it you're trying to get, hopefully it does work out for you there. So rock out. I think that you're in good shape either way there. But I appreciate the chat. I hope that helped you out some. I know sometimes my answers aren't a complete yes this way or a yes that way answer, but I'm usually more about the information and finding things that you might feel help sway you towards the side that you want to get to. So that would be my thoughts on that one. Appreciate the chat. Rock out. I see a chat here from Joe that says, do you think Eckler's ghost performance in the passing game was due to the hammy or the Chargers offense shifting? I don't think it was. I don't think you have to be concerned with the Chargers offense. I think Austin Eckler is going to be just fine there. I think it's very possible it was just injury concerns. If you look at what happened last year, when Austin Eckler was out, Keenan Allen seemed like every target was going to him. And as soon as Eckler came back, the targets really shifted. I mean, Eckler really put a dent in Keenan Allen's targets. You got to remember that Washington is not every week is going to be as tough a defense as Washington was in this schedule. And the fact that he had some injury concerns to start off a year when he spent some time injured last year, I'm sure that coaching staff didn't want to create a situation that made things worse either. So I don't think that Austin Eckler is somebody that you have to push the panic button on right now. I think he's going to be fine. Justin Herbert, I think it's going to be fine. Like the production fantasy points were not what you wanted from him this week, but he still had the yards. Just didn't have the touchdowns. And Mike Williams was involved quite a bit more. I think this offense is going to be fine. I think they're going to be a good team throughout the season. So yeah, I think you're going to be okay with Eckler. I think he will get more healthy, hopefully, and we will see where that goes. So yes, I think the answer is, the answer is no. I don't think it was the Chargers offense shifting. I think Eckler's going to be just fine. And I drafted Eckler pretty high in a bunch of leagues myself. So I hope that's the case as well, not just from a evaluation standpoint, but also from a fact standpoint of that, that's certainly a player that I want to be able to count on as the year goes on. So hope it works out for you, Joe, there, as well as hope it works out for me as well. Rock out, you say, okay, thanks. And I say, no, thank you. As always, thank you guys for being in the chat. We appreciate having you guys on the chat because, like I always say, much rather be talking fantasy football with you than just talking to you. We'll let you know that our live chat remains open for the rest of the show. We have a little bit more content to get through in terms of the waiver wire. I told you that we have the bonus waiver wire names in addition to the top 5, so I will get to that next while we if there are any more chats after that, we can go to look at those afterwards. But just a reminder, the live chat is open. If you guys are watching on replay, glad to hear your comments also as well. So feel free to drop us comments below. And as I always say, for those of you that might be new to the stream, want to make sure that you're able to get those notifications whenever we have new content, and also the likes and the subscribes definitely help out as we are, still a growing channel. So appreciate you guys being with us, and look forward to seeing all you guys as well on future streams. Let's get back over to the remainder of our content here for the waiver wire. We'll take you first into a reminder of the top 5 that I had mentioned for this week on the waiver wire, and that is Elijah Mitchell as number 1. Sorry, hit my microphone there. Hope you didn't hear that. Christian Kirk as number 2. Mark Ingram as number 3. Juwan Johnson from the Saints, and then Darnell Mooney. And we'll give you some bonus names out of everybody that I looked through. Again, in terms of the waiver wire, I'm talking about players that are rostered in less than 50% of all leagues. So a couple of bonus names to look at. Cole Beasley from the Bills, currently rostered in 45% of all leagues. I think in terms of wide receivers, he barely missed out on my top 5. 13 targets last week. We know what he's done in the past there. 8 catches, didn't have a touchdown, but he had 60 yards against a tough defense. I'm sure they're going to lean on Cole Beasley out of the slot throughout most of the season. The Bills are going to pass it a lot. A decent run, not a great run of games coming up for Beasley, but Miami this week. Last year, Miami gave up the 11th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They have Washington after that, but then they have Houston, who was at 7th, and then Kansas City, who was down a little bit lower. So Cole Beasley, a guy that I think is going to continue to be involved in the offense there in Buffalo. I think a worthy player that you can look at on the waiver wire. Probably won't cost you your waiver priority if he made it this far. He didn't really have a big enough game that everybody's going to go out there and waste that priority on him. So I think Beasley is in line. Here's a guy that I know I talked about before about Juwan Johnson and whether or not he might return that value at the tight end spot. There are a couple of other guys that I think are in line here at tight end. I think Cole Kmet. And also, I had to have – there's only so many Coles available. So I have to have all these Coles to talk about here. I've got both of them. If there are others that I missed, then I apologize to them. But for Chicago, Cole Kmet rostered in 34% of all leagues. When I'm looking at tight ends here, I'm looking for guys that seem to be involved in the passing game enough that you feel like you might have production on a weekly basis from them. The tight end spot is so difficult because you just don't know what you're going to get. A lot of times you're just hoping somebody finds the end zone. 7 targets for Cole Kmet last week, 5 catches, 42 yards. The upside of what you see here for Kmet is his matchups in the upcoming weeks. He has a nice run of games coming up here. So if you're somebody who likes to stream tight ends, this is a player you might potentially be able to look for. Cincinnati last week gave up the 7th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. Cleveland the week after that gave up the 3rd most last year to the tight end spot and started out this year giving up the 2nd most. And then you have Detroit, a team that's not probably going to be playing all that well. They only gave up the 21st, which is the 12th fewest last year. And then Vegas, who was 16th right in the middle. So you've got a couple of games in a row in these next 2 weeks. If you're a player who likes to stream tight ends, that Cole Kmet could return some value for you there. So he's a player to keep an eye on in terms of tight ends. The next guy in terms of bonus players that I've got is Jalen Rhaegar for the Eagles. Jalen Rhaegar is a player who landed on my lists quite often last year. I may potentially be a little bit higher on him than some people, but I felt like there's potential there for him. And between him and Devonta Smith, I think those are the 2 guys that are going to be the top wide receiver targets in Philadelphia. It's just a matter of which one, kind of ends up being the number 1 guy for Jalen Hurts. Rhaegar had 6 catches on 6 targets last week, 49 yards, had a touchdown. He's got a nice game. This week he plays the 49ers. Last year they were 18th, so that's the 15th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. But then they played Dallas the week after that, 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So is Jalen Rhaegar somebody who could continue to find his way in that offense? Possibly. I think it's someone that you could stash on your bench and see what happens. I like the potential there in that Philadelphia offense. And then the 4th guy I have, and this is a deeper name in terms of the bonus names, James O'Shaughnessy from Jacksonville. Currently rostered in 0.0% of leagues. So I don't know why anybody's going to be running out to use their waiver priority on this guy. However, this is a guy, not only deeper leagues, but I think that could potentially be a sleeper. One of the things that I've kind of been trying to keep an eye on, like a team like Jacksonville, you really don't know how that offense is going to shake out. They're going to throw the ball a lot, it seems. When you have to throw the ball as much as you did against Houston, who are you not going to have to throw the ball against? And O'Shaughnessy last week, 8 targets, 6 catches for 48 yards. Again, I'm looking to find, are there players out there at the tight end spot who have enough volume that it's possible that they have a weekly relevancy when it's that difficult to find good tight ends, especially if you're streaming them. O'Shaughnessy is somebody who has caught my eye, and I don't know how many people's eye he has caught at this point. When you look at the rest of the receiver core there with DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, is there a clear-cut guy who is going to demand all of the work every week? I'm not sure. If they are willing to work in O'Shaughnessy on a weekly basis and they're going to throw the ball a lot, then he could potentially have some consistent volume there, and that's what I like about this guy and his potential. It's something that I'm going to keep an eye on. His run of games is not awesome coming up. Denver this week, last year was 15th, so right in the middle in terms of fantasy points to tight ends. Arizona was at 26th, that's 7th fewest. Cincinnati the week after that was the 7th most. And then Tennessee at 13th, so right in the middle. So those are my bonus names just to wrap that up in terms of these guys. Cole Beasley, Cole Kmet. I couldn't think of any more Coles, so that was all I got on there. Jalen Rhaegar from the Eagles, and then a deeper. Sometimes on these lists, I will try to at least have somebody in a deeper type player. And that's James O'Shaughnessy from the Jaguars this week. I'm interested to see what happens there. It's something that I'll be keeping an eye on. That is our waiver wire content for tonight. A bunch of names. Hope some of that helps you guys out. We will wrap it up with a few more comments, and then we will probably call it a night here. So let me see what we got here. I don't want to miss anybody. If I miss anybody, just let me know. I'm just looking to see where we are. Let's see. DJ. I see Takashi. I see Vansco. I think I'm not far enough down. I think I've scrolled all the way back up to the top somehow. Let's see where we are here. All right. I'm just looking. Zachary Chirinkin. I think I got that again. Here's Joe. I don't think I got this one. I guess the Dallas defense will get him right this week. And I think you were talking about Eckler there. Again, if you go over to our 6 picks game, one of the matchups in the 6 picks game that you could pick the winner on is from this game, and that is Ezekiel Elliott and Austin Eckler. I know that I have Eckler in a few leagues and Zeke in none, so I'm hoping that Eckler gets the better side of that one. But yeah, the Dallas defense makes a lot of players look good, so it's very possible that happens again. Jordan W., you've been waiting around a while I was doing that content, so appreciate it, Jordan. Here's the chat that you have. It looks like you might be a new viewer, so welcome. Should I trade TJ Hawkinson for Mark Andrews and Deebo Samuel? If you need depth at the wide receiver, or if you need another wide receiver, I think Hawkinson for Andrews is going to be a step down this year, and probably pretty considerable, because in Detroit, I'm not sure who else they can throw the ball to besides their running backs. TJ Hawkinson is potentially, can you put him in the same class as the way you look at Darren Waller in Vegas? There are no receivers that scare you for the Raiders, and it's just Darren Waller. When I looked at the rundown of stats from that Detroit game, and I looked at the wide receivers, I was like, who? Like, who's that? Like, what? Like, I think TJ Hawkinson is the only guy that you're going to count on other than, Williams and Swift. I think he's going to return a lot of value. And if you took a chance on him in your drafts, I don't know if I would give up on him after 1 week, just simply because Deebo Samuel had a great game. Potentially if Brandon Ayuk works his way back into the good graces there and takes a bunch of that volume away, and also George Kittle takes a bunch of that volume away from Samuel, it's unlikely that all of a sudden Deebo Samuel is going to be returning Tyreek Hill stats every week. So, of course, he would be a playable wide receiver to add to your roster, but the downgrade that Mark Andrews is a good tight end. I just don't know that. I probably have never been as high on Mark Andrews as some other people have. I think some of his good production has been touchdown based, which it always is for tight ends. But I think that TJ Hawkinson is probably going to see a more predictable volume on a week in and week out basis. And if you are comfortable with the rest of your roster, and if you are comfortable with the rest of your wide receivers without adding a Deebo Samuel, then I think you're going to be better off to keep Hawkinson as your tight end than Andrews. So I guess the answer that I'm saying here is I think on the side of TJ Hawkinson is the side of this trade that I would fall. I think I would prefer at this point that this guy is going to possibly live up to his potential this year for Detroit, a team that's going to trail in probably most of their games and be forced to throw the ball. And when you look at their roster, who in the world else are they going to throw it to? So that's some good production for Hockenson. I think that I would probably favor that side. I hope that helps out. And Jordan, again, I appreciate the chat, and glad to have you with us. Hope to look forward to seeing you on future streams as well. Joe says, thoughts on Tyler Higbee this year? I'm thinking he could be the number 5 tight end at best and 10 at worst with a healthy season. I do think the outlook for Higbee is better this year than it's been in any other season now that Gerald Everett is not there. He was not – when I drafted tight ends this year, we did a couple of mock draft shows, and I talked a little about my draft strategy. The tight ends that fell in the area where I was looking to draft them, which was around 7th, 8th round area, usually the players that was Robert Tonyan and Logan Thomas were the players that I was targeting in that area. There sat Tyler Higbee most of the time in addition to those players. It wasn't someone that I had put a lot of consideration into because in the past it never seemed like he returned the value that a lot of people thought he would. But a lot of that I think had to do with the influence of Gerald Everett being there. And now that you don't have that, and also you have Matthew Stafford there instead of Jared Goff. Now, I know Jared Goff had a very nice game this week, but you would think that Matthew Stafford is going to produce on a more consistent basis for them. Perhaps he has a nice role with Tyler Higbee. I think it's also interesting that you saw Van Jefferson involved as much as you did for the Rams this week, wondering if this is a younger player who's going to step up a little more this year. My thought on Tyler Higbee is, yeah, I do think he has the chance to be an every week starter in a spot where you rarely find tight ends that you can rely on week in and week out. Again, I don't have his numbers. I want to say he had around 7 or 8 fantasy points in a PPR this week, which, if you haven't drafted one of those top tight ends, like any week where you don't end up with 1 or 2, sometimes feels like you're doing real well. So, yeah, I think that could he be 5th? It's possible he could be up there. I mean, you're not going to surpass Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Hockenson. So if you're talking about him 5th, it's guys like Mark Andrews that he's going by. It's guys like Logan Thomas, guys like Robert Tonyan. Tell me who else there is that I'm not thinking of at the tight end spot. It's once you get down past those first few guys, it seems like anybody, it could be all or nothing from anybody at that point. So if Higbee being there, basically the only pass-catching tight end that you would expect for the Rams means that he has a more consistent role, then yes, those of you that went for him in drafts is going to pay off for you. And I think I have Higbee in 1. I'm not sure if I drafted him in more than 1. But I do think that there is a possibility that he does return a little bit more on his potential than he has in the past. I certainly think it's a better situation in all ways, the lack of Everett and the new quarterback. So I do like the situation there, and we'll see how that plays out. I do see a follow-up here. It says he took 100% of the tight end snaps Sunday, 11-6 without a TD. Okay, yeah, 6 targets is, again, just like I was talking about with the other tight ends on the waiver wire. Like you're looking for I'm not a guy that wants to say, great, this guy had a great fantasy number because he had, 3 catches on 3 targets, but he had 2 touchdowns. Of course, I'm referring to Juwan Johnson. It's nice to have the points. Do you feel like that's going to be, consistent from week to week, or would you rather have the guy that has more potential because he's seeing a regular amount of targets? I certainly think that has a better chance for Higbee at this point. So I would agree that there is some upside there. We will look to see on what he returns. And I think that our resident LA Rams fan, Vansco, who joined us tonight, will probably be looking to see that same sort of production from Tyler Higbee if Vansco is still with us. Thank you, Joe, for the chat. Appreciate. I think that's all the chats that we got for tonight. We had a really decent amount of information today, so we appreciate you guys being on the chat. Let me go ahead and put up a couple of pieces of information for you guys just to close out the show here. I want to remind you about our 6 picks game that is available. The link is in the description area. That's a season-long thing that we're going to do here. Right now, the leader is Bill Romanowski, who was with us tonight in the chat. You guys that are out there, go ahead and challenge him. Make those picks. Those picks have to be made on the 6 picks video itself in order for them to count. And also, if you're going to play that game throughout the year, I kind of wanted to mention that it's going to be based on your YouTube account name. So if for some reason your account name changes during the year, that might kind of throw off your recording of the stats as the year goes on. So it's something I thought of that I wanted to mention on that. But it's pretty simple with this game. It's just 6 matchups. They are in the matchups that you see on that video are within the same game. So it's a game that you can watch with some interest, like the New Orleans Carolina game. You're talking about Kamara, McCaffrey. Just kind of adds a little bit to your fantasy watching on a week-to-week basis. We're going to keep these standings all year long. We're using PPR scoring, and you basically pick whoever you think is going to have the bigger fantasy day in each of those 6 matchups. Pick all 6 of them. Those picks will close at 1 o'clock on Sunday each week, and we'll see how everybody does. So, like I said, the current leader right now is Bill Romanowski. We'll put up his picture there, and he was with us tonight on the chat, and I think Bill welcomes the challenge for those of you that are out there and are able to try to see if you can move up that leaderboard. So check out that 6 picks game. Again, the link is in the description area. And hopefully we'll have some good fantasy matchups then that can kind of give you a little bit of interest. Let me see. I'm going to take a look at one more chat here. And this is Joe that says, nice hat, by the way. I didn't get to play this summer. I haven't played as much as I wanted to. I am not good at golf. But I don't really play golf trying to be good. I don't feel like I feel like that would just be too frustrating. Like, I don't know why I would want to do that. I enjoy getting out there, hitting the ball around. My goal is usually in the summer is for 1 par. And if I get 1 par, then my goal becomes 1 birdie. So sometimes in the summer that will happen. I am not a good golfer. I enjoy the game. But it's not like I'm pretty sure I've never broken 100. And a lot of times if I get done and I still have golf balls left, then it's a good day. So the hat, don't let it mislead you all that much in terms of any ability on the course. It's kind of something to do for fun. I'm sure some of you kind of can relate to that. Like golf is a fun game. It's fun if you're really good at it. But if you're not really good at it and then you try to be good, sometimes it's not quite the same afternoon as you would have hoped for. So we'll let the hat kind of be the best of the golf thing, because the game itself might not actually live up to that. But I do appreciate it. I've had other comments on this hat before, and I think this hat has been the hat I've worn on every show that I've done. So it's kind of the deal right now. But in terms of the golf ability, no, it's like we'll just see if we can have golf balls when the round is over. But appreciate it, Joe. Thank you. And I'll get you one last chat here. He says, love it, man. All for the fun of it. Yeah, pound some drinks, hang out with the guys. There's nothing wrong with a good day on the golf course. And the only thing that can make it not a good day on the golf course is being absolutely frustrated because you're terrible at the game. So I don't want to go that route. I'll just try to enjoy it. Appreciate it, Joe. Appreciate all you guys in the chat. Thank you all, as always. Glad to have you with us. A lot of good information. Hope you all get your waiver claims that you're looking for this week. And look forward to week 2. And if you're 1-0, we hope that you're going to go to 2-0 this week. And if you're 0-1, we hope you can even out that record at 1-1. But either way, it's fantasy football. The season's underway. 17-game season this year, so we'll look forward to a lot of good action, and hopefully it works out all well for everybody. So as I always say, we'll wrap it up for this stream. Good luck in fantasy. We'll see you next time.